Hello, thank you for tuning into this week's edition of TCS Student News. I'm Rhys.
And I'm Mohamed. Today we'll be talking about the current hostage negotiation between Israel and Hamas. Our conversation with former President and City Council Miss Mary Pat Clark, and some seminars we had this week.
As the war between Israel and Hamas continues, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is growing. Millions of Palestinians have been displaced and are suffering from a lack of food, water, and adequate shelter. Israeli airstrikes have killed thousands of citizens in Gaza. Israeli defense forces have cut off electricity and blocked some aid to hospitals. Many people are pleading for a ceasefire to allow humanitarian aid and evacuations to reach cut-off areas because of fighting. In a CNN interview, a nurse with Doctors Without Borders shared her experience working in the hospital and refugee camps, saying the conditions and images she saw are still with her today. In Al Shifa Hospital, the conditions are deteriorating every day. They are without many supplies and have power outages. At least 31 premature babies were there in Al Shifa Hospital. Much equipment didn't work without power, and the baby's formula had contaminated water in it. Several of these babies are in critical condition and fighting serious infections. They have just been transported to hospitals in the south. 2 of them died. The Egyptian government is in the process of transporting these babies to treat them. One parent has been identified for one of the children. People are demanding there be a ceasefire to send in humanitarian aid and evacuate people, but both sides are discussing. Hey Mohamed, can you tell us what both sides want?
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly said that there will be no ceasefire unless all hostages were released. Israel believes that a ceasefire will allow Hamas to move hostages and it will ruin current intelligence on hostage whereabouts. Israel also believes that a ceasefire would help Hamas rearm for further Israeli attacks. Israel's government has been strict in all talks, but Qatar and U.S. officials are making ground in a ceasefire. Hamas is seeking a release of all Palestine prisoners in Israeli jails. They also set a new condition where Israel has to deliver fuel to hospitals, but Israel has opposed this, saying Hamas will use this to their own benefit. Hey Rhys, what is your opinion on all this? What are the people talking about here?
The situation in Gaza is only getting worse, and I would like a ceasefire to happen as soon as possible. Negotiations need to be engaged by different countries because that's the only time we've seen real progress. The Biden administration has agreed with Israel on many issues, and they have their own intelligence on the whereabouts of hostages. I hope to see a ceasefire happen. Many people in the U.S. are super passionate about such a controversial issue. Many colleges are banning certain groups over anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a complex historical issue that has led to genocide. The attacks on Israel on October 7 were brutal, and I think Israel has the right to defend itself. But I think both sides are wrong. Israel is killing the citizens of Gaza. More than 10,000 people, many of whom are children, are dying in these airstrikes and are being starved out. Mohamed, what do you think of this conflict?
I really think the conflict between Israel and Hamas should stay between the fighting forces. Innocent civilians on both sides have been hurt by this conflict. I hope a ceasefire can be reached and upheld by the two sides so that citizens can get out of the crossfire.
Wait. There's some breaking news. Both sides have agreed to a ceasefire and a deal on hostages. Israel and Hamas agreed on a temporary ceasefire and hostage release plan. The deal includes Israel will release 150 Palestinian prisoners, mainly who are children and women, and Hamas will release 12 to 13 hostages each day for 4 days starting on Monday. Israel will also allow fuel shipments into Gaza to relieve pressure on the people. All the hostages and prisoners on both sides are women and children. I'm glad both sides figured it out. This will help the situation in Gaza so much. Now, we're going to move on to TCS Student News.
Last week, we had a conversation with Miss Mary Pat Clark, who is a former president of the City Council. Miss Mary Pat was the first woman elected to citywide office in Baltimore when she became City Council president in 1987. I really like this conversation. Miss Mary Pat is a very interesting person to be around. We had an extended introduction that was really in depth. Miss Mary Pat Clark asked us about who we were and what we thought thought was important to us. Personally, I mentioned my love for the game of basketball and how I wanted to play professionally. She gave us some tips on how to help achieve our goals. One of the tips was networking. Networking is important as a professional basketball player because it helps you get scouted for teams. Hey Rhys, what did you think about this conversation?
Miss Mary Pat Clark brought up many points of discussion and shared her history of the time in the city council. She started the New Democratic Club and the East Baltimore Democratic Club, which formed a coalition to build equal black representation from Baltimore City to the Maryland General Assembly. Prior to this, there was only one black representative in the General Assembly, and they're representing the majority black citizens of Baltimore. She stressed the importance of citizens being involved, especially young people in government. She was the first woman elected to citywide office in Baltimore City's history when she became the city council president. She paved the way for newer representatives, and many of them owe their start in politics to her. She has a long history in the school near its beginning and has been a strong supporter. She is on the school advisory board, taught a course here, and has helped countless students in getting grants and scholarships to college. Thank you for representing my district and being such a stand-up person. You are incredibly kind to what you do for the students here, and we really appreciate you.
For this week's financial literacy class, we talked about the importance of budgeting and we played a game that helped us figure out what needs and wants were more important. This class, we were joined by Miss Dawn, who is the Director of Insurance at Berman Macular. In this game, Miss Kathleen gave us two sheets of paper that gave us options like what transportation do we want, what housing we chose, what phone and internet do we want. We used M&Ms as currency, and we were given around 20 to split up on the paper. My team was trying to be strategic with our spending choices. We prioritized some things over others. We focused on our health coverage, fast internet, and we shared an apartment. Hey Rhys, what does your group do?
My group consisted of Kendall, Kennedy, and I. We were extremely cheap. We had little to no disagreements over our choices except for when it came to our phone and internet plan. Kendall insisted she couldn't have a basic phone like a Motorola and instead needed an iPhone and fast internet. We lived with our parents until we were 40 years old and we didn't have health care for 20 years. The good part about it was we saved around 15% of our income and invested for retirement since we were 21 years old. We were set for retirement. Thank you, Miss Kathleen and Miss Dawn, for the financial literacy class and lunch. I love this class because it's so thought-provoking and a blast. We can't wait for the next class. On Tuesday, we had our Young Players class. In this class, we expanded our plays by developing our characters and our setting. My play is set in a kingdom led by Lord Bartholomew. Lord Bartholomew is old, rich, and will use force if people oppose him. The main character is a soldier named Bran, who has been wanting to become knighted for a long time. The kings and nobles have brushed him aside. The world in my play is going to be similar to what you see in Ireland. Big green plains and plateaus overlooking the coast. You can hear the waves crashing on the rocky edges. The plot of my story is the king sent Bran to investigate recent sightings of witchcraft. The king wanted Bran to kill the witches because the king had been secretly doing witchcraft. It's sort of like a detective story, but in the medieval times. We also split off into groups and were told to write a story about a certain message. My group consists of Fatima, Danny, and I, and our message was never judge a book by its cover. Our story was about how an old man who looked poor and didn't dress well was constantly made fun of and no one wanted to help him. A little boy started to help the old man, and when the old man suffered from a heart attack and died, the little boy inherited his money. People started to act differently about the old man's death and feel sorry for him. They found out he was a billionaire, but the old man was a billionaire but never let the money change who he was. Mohamed, what did you think of this class?
I really enjoyed this class. The group activity was really fun. I liked the short stories we did with our prompt. Thank you so much, Mr. Grant, for the amazing class. We appreciate you for coming every Tuesday to teach us about theater and writing plays.
This week's special Spotlight On segment is on our teacher, Miss Shania. Miss Shania is a Fulbright scholar and taught an indigenous people in Taiwan. She also lived in Taiwan for 3 years. She came back to teach us here, but she recently broke her foot and is having a hard time because of it. Even while her foot is broken, she still comes in every day positive and teaches us. We really appreciate your dedication to the school, Miss Shania.
Thank you, Ms. Janai, for coming and teaching us every day. You make such a big difference here, and we appreciate your help at the school. Now, we would like to thank everyone who brought in lunch this week.
Thank you, Mr. Ken and Miss Paulette, for the chicken wraps on Wednesday. These are delicious. We appreciate your continued support to the school.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Mary Louise, for the Italian cold cuts on Thursday. These sandwiches are good. Thank you for providing us lunch.
Thank you, Miss Lisa Nickmeyer, for the mac and cheese, bean salad, and pie on Friday. This lunch was great. Thank you for your generosity.
Thank you, Burma Macular, Miss Kathleen, and Miss Dawn for the barbecue sandwiches and salad. We really appreciate your kindness in providing lunch and a wonderful financial literacy class.
Thank you, Miss Peg, for the Thanksgiving dinner on a roll, grapes, sweet potato fries, and cheesecake. Miss Peg, I love the sauce on the sandwiches, and the grapes were flavorful. Thank you for preparing these lunches for us every week.
Well, that wraps up this week's edition of TCS News. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn off post notifications for when we drop our next broadcast.
Bye, and have a happy Thanksgiving.